It is my pleasure to present Charlie Catlett, who will be doing a presentation on the 1933 Santa Monica Breakwater so-called dollar. Take it away, Charlie.
Well, the idea for this topic came up actually from a local Santa Rosa club I'm in here, the Redwood Empire Coin Club. I've been the secretary there for 25 years. And every month we have a topic, and people bring items related to that topic to talk about. For August, the topic is going to be summertime numismatics. And that's really hard for somebody like me who collects ancient coins. Couldn't think of anything that would go. Then I remember this token I saw actually, it was in Jeff Shevlin's case at our coin show a couple of years ago. Um, if I can get this to work, there we go. Um, Featuring the the Santa Monica breakwater, and it had this image of the Santa Monica breakwater and a lady in front of a roller coaster. Um, and it reminded me of growing up as a kid in the 1960s and 1970s. I lived in the San Fernando Valley at the time, on the border of Northridge and Reseda, and it was the lowest and hottest part of the valley, typically 105 degrees all summer. Fortunately, I had a great aunt who lived in Santa Monica, and she lived 4 blocks from the beach. She rented her one-bedroom apartment for $128, 4 blocks from the beach in Santa Monica. And because of rent control, they couldn't increase the rents. She lived to be 96, and they were really glad when she can die so they could raise the rent and make some money off of her. But I spent a lot of time in my summer days in Santa Monica, cooling off from the hot San Fernando Valley, going to the beach, and mostly I was body surfing in my high school days and my first year of college at Cal State Northridge. And I remember a lot about the Santa Monica Pier as a kid. There's an accessory road called Appian Way that ran under the pier at the beginning of the pier and ended in a parking lot where we usually parked. Underneath the pier on the ocean side of that road, there was a fish market. And I didn't like fish, but they made this wonderful smoked fish that I would just devour. You can actually drive onto the pier at the time, and I think there was parking there at the pier. And if you look south along the beach, you could see POP, which was Pacific Ocean Park, which was an amusement park designed to compete with Disneyland. I never got to go to there because the one time our family tried to get in, it was closed, and then it shut down in 1967 when I was 10 years old. But here's where the H&K dollar confused me at first. I'll describe the coins a lot later and show you the different varieties. But basically, the obverse inscription was Souvenir Breakwater, 1933, Santa Monica, California. And it shows, the beach. Here's the Santa Monica Pier, and here's the breakwater at the end of the Santa Monica Pier. The reverse inscription is souvenir from Southern California's playground, Ocean Park, but there's a different pier extending over the ocean with the amusement rides on it. These are two different locations, which just didn't make sense to me. And trying to remember 50 to 60 years ago was a challenge, and thank goodness for Google. So I started a little look into all this, and I found a January 1940 souvenir map of the Santa Monica area. And there weren't just 2 piers, there were 3 piers. Here's the Santa Monica Pier with the breakwater. Here is the Ocean Park Pier, and there's a little water slide ride here that I'll show you a little bit later. And there's actually a 3rd pier called the Venice Pier. And just for orientation, here's a map of modern Santa Monica. This is Marina del Rey. This is where the Venice fishing pier is. This is Venice, where there are actually some canals, which I'll show you. This is Ocean Park, and up here is where the Santa Monica Pier still is. So the very bottom pier was the Venice, oops, I was going to say the very first pier um, in Venice was built in 1904 called the Abbot Kinney Pier, named after Abbot Kinney, who was a local millionaire who financed it. He's the man who placed canals made of concrete lined canals in that section of Santa Monica in 1905 to help build, quote, the Venice of the Americas. The Venice canals are still present today, 117 years later. And in case you're wondering, there are floodgates that every 3 days at low tide, they open the floodgates, let the water drain, and when the high tide comes in, they close the gates and it stays filled up for the next 3 days.
Mhm.
The pier, which was started in 1904, never got completed and was destroyed by storms right away. It was quickly rebuilt in 1905, just in time for the 4th of July. And instead of a planned 900-foot pier, it was extended 1,200 feet out with the breakwater, which you can see at the end of the photo here, to help prevent further damage from future storms. Buildings and attractions were added over the years until 1920, when a gas heater ignited a fire that destroyed nearly all the pier. Kinney's heirs rebuilt the pier, opening it on May 28, 1921, with concessions, rides, a dance hall, hotels and restaurant, and business basically went up and down over the years. And when the Kinney Company's 25-year Tidelands lease for the pier expired in 1946, instead of simply renewing it, the city of Los Angeles, which had incorporated Venice, declined to renew the lease. This is due to the City of Los Angeles Department of Parks and Recreation having a long-range plan to widen the beaches and remove all man-made piers. The piers were closed in 1946, and it took over a year to remove it. They did build a new pier in Venice in 1965 as a fishing pier. It was partially destroyed by storms in 1983, reopened 1997, damaged further in storms, and finally opened in 2006, and it is still looking just like this today. And I went to tokencatalog.com and I was able to find actually 3 different tokens from the Venice Pier. Now, one's good for 10 cents in trade, one's good for a couple bucks in trade. I couldn't really find more info and don't quite know how to look much more into that. But there's a third token here that says Harrah's Amusement, free play on both sides. And you could read along with me. This is a direct quote from Token Catalog. William Fisk Harrah was the son of a Venice, California lawyer and real estate operator. The senior Harrah went bankrupt during the Depression and was left with only one asset, a leased building on the honky-tonk Venice Pier, jutting into the Pacific Ocean. Harry operated a nickel and dime game of dubious legality, loosely based on bingo, in which players sat in a circle and rolled marbles towards a number. In 1930, his son Bill went to work running the game and soon concluded he could do better than his father, who sold it to him for $500. He got rid of the shills his father had hired, refurbished the premises, and grossed as much as $50,000 a year. And this was the beginning of the Harrah's Casino and Hotel empire. So that's something I hadn't really known. Moving a little north on the beach from the Venice Pier, Ocean Park is a section of Santa Monica which began in 1895 when Abbott Kinney purchased 1.5 miles of marshy Santa Monica beachfront property, named it Ocean Park, and began developing the area. Ironically, there is an Ocean Park, Washington, which is north of Long Beach, Washington. The Ocean Park neighborhood in Santa Monica has its own zip code and was a trendy area to go back in the day. It had a pier with an interesting history. It was financed by Alexander Fraser, a former business partner of Abbott Kinney, as a competing attraction. Fraser's $1 million pier opened in 1911. Charles Lick added the Lick Pier to the $1 million pier, and both burned to the ground in 1912. The piers and attractions were rebuilt and reopened in 1913, and in 1919 it was renamed the Pickering Pier after Ernest Pickering purchased and greatly expanded it by 400,000 square feet, added 5 new rides, and the reopening in 1920 saw 85,000 people attend the first weekend. Within 4 years, it too was destroyed by a fire in 1924. Charles Lick came back and purchased and reopened the pier in 1925 as Ocean Park Pier. It flourished for years with several renovations, And if you remember on that funny little map I showed you from 1940, this is that water chute ride that was at the end of the pier on the postcard. So this is the Ocean Park Pier. It kind of grew outdated, and by World War II, there was a large decline in the attendance, but it was 1956 that had its resurgence, being purchased by CBS and the Los Angeles Turf Club. After 2 years of renovation, Pacific Ocean Park, also known as POP, opened to the public. It was designed to be a nautical themed amusement park in direct competition with Disneyland. Top notch amusement park designers and Hollywood special effects artists were involved in the design. It opened July 28, 1958, and outdrew Disneyland in attendance the first week it was open. Its popularity lasted about 10 years, though, and it closed on October 6, 1967, and its assets were sold off a year later. A big part of the decline was due to a massive urban redevelopment of Ocean Park by the city of Santa Monica, where they actually closed off the access road to the pier. And like many iterations previously, the pier burned down in a series of arson fires from 1969 to 1974. And I remember reading about these in the Los Angeles Times. And the headline of the Times would be POP, burned in arson fire. And, several months later, POP burned down again in an arson fire, over and over again. So there's nothing left of POP or the pier except a few submerged pilings down in the ocean. And once again, I was able to find a few tokens from Ocean Park Pier. And I was really happy to find one that actually said POP, because that's what I remember seeing as a kid. Santa Monica had a number of piers dating as far back as 1875, which kind of came and went. But in 1908, Santa Monica decided to build a pier to carry sewer pipes beyond the breakers and dump the raw sewage directly in the ocean. And they hoped the pier might attract tourists as well. It cost $100,000 and took 6 months to complete. It was the first concrete pier on the West Coast, 1,600 feet long, 30 feet wide, and it opened on September 9th, 1909, the 59th anniversary of California being admitted to the Union. Over 1,000 people showed up on opening day with 2 Navy cruisers docked alongside for people to tour and with concerts playing all day. There are no definitive attractions, but the pier quickly grew to be a popular fishing spot, particularly for the large black sea bass that used to be abundant in the area. And I really have no idea how the sea bass tasted with raw sewage being dumped out to sea, but they actually stopped dumping sewage in the 1920s. In 1916, Charles Loof purchased the land immediately south of the pier and developed it into an amusement park. He had previously constructed carousels for Coney Island before moving west and realized the potential of this area. He obtained permission to link his pier to the municipal pier and opened the amusement park in 1916. He built the Loof Hippodrome and installed a carousel inside it. So this picture from the 1920s you see on the right, here is the Santa Monica Municipal Pier extending 1,600 feet into the ocean. And this is the Loof Pier. This is the Hippodrome where the carousel is inside of it. For several reasons, the pier went downhill and was sold in 1923 to the Santa Monica Amusement Company. New development occurred with adding of rides and attractions, including adding the La Monica Ballroom, which is this big building at the end. It was the largest ballroom in the country at the time. The pier was still popular at the time with fishermen, and in particular, Olaf C. Olson was always seen there with a wooden pipe in his mouth. This inspired E.C. Seeger, who took fishing trips with Olson to create the Popeye comic strip, which is something I didn't know. The pier thrived in the Depression. It thrived until the Depression. At that point, the big Whirlwind Dipper roller coaster and the La Monica Ballroom were closed in 1930 and removed. Most of the other rides and attractions were also closed. After the Depression, the pier lay untouched in regard to an amusement park until 1943, when Venice banker Walter Newcomb purchased the lease and changed the name to Newcomb Pier. The original carousel had been sold in 1937 and replaced with a Parker carousel. I'm not sure what that is, but that was sold in 1947 and replaced by a carousel which had been taken from the nearby Venice Pier. It had been made in 1922 by the Philadelphia Toboggan Company, and it's still working today. And I remember as a kid going on the merry-go-round where you used to reach out and try to grab rings. And if you catch a golden ring, it was good for prizes. The other rings you just tossed at targets in the middle of the merry-go-round. Newcomb died in 1948, and his widow operated the park, with the carousel being the only attraction on the pier for decades. Going back to 1939, a highway project removed access to the pier, and a new ramp was built from the end of Colorado Boulevard directly onto the pier. The Santa Monica Businessmen's Association paid $2,000 for a neon lit sign at the entrance of the pier to attract tourists. It was unveiled in 1940. The original sign is still in place, with only the neon tubing and wiring having been replaced. Santa Monica was smart to copyright or trademark, the sign, and it's a designated landmark. A severe winter storm in 1983 destroyed a third of the pier. It prompted a community restoration process to return the pier to its former glory. This meant the return of an amusement park for the first time since the 1930s. It's named Pacific Park, and it opened in 1996, and it's still there today. So if you look, here's Colorado Boulevard. It goes directly onto the pier, and you can go all the way out to the end of the pier. If you look, there's a road. I guess this is north of the pier. This is Highway 1, or the Pacific Coast Highway. Actually goes under through a tunnel underneath and continues on the other side. Highway 1 directly becomes US Interstate 10. So if you drive 7 hours straight from Santa Monica, you'll be in Phoenix, Arizona. Let's see. And finally, I'm getting to the breakwater here. Since the initial construction of the Santa Monica Pier, there had been a long desire to build a breakwater and yacht harbor at the end of the pier. In 1930, the Santa Monica City Council voted to build a breakwater and boat harbor north of the pier. Originally, it was to be made of concrete, but the currents were too rough. So thousands of tons of lightweight stone from Catalina Island were piled to form a breakwater. Construction started March 25, 1933, and was completed August 5, 1934, at a cost of $690,000. Yachts, fishing boats, and a cruise liner to Catalina Island made the yacht harbor their home. The breakwater was completed just in time for a highly publicized Santa Monica Regatta held the week of August 5 through 12, 1934. There was a dedication ceremony actually at the beginning of construction. There was a ceremony to dedicate the completion of construction in 1934. Unfortunately, the breakwater was not well planned, caused a lot of turbulence from ocean waters, and reshaped many of the nearby waters and beaches. It gradually began sinking into the sandy floor. By the 1940s, it was relatively unsafe to moor small boats. In 1965, nearby Marina del Rey opened, spelling an end to boating in the Santa Monica Pier. Storms finally swept away the rest of the breakwater in 1982. In 1983, it was the storm that swept away a third of the Santa Monica Pier, and ironically, there were 10-foot swells that the breakwater wasn't there to protect. The 10-foot swells swept away the part of the pier that was only 8 feet above the water. So here's a photo from 1958. This is what I remember as a kid growing up. You can literally drive down to the pier, you can park, you can walk to the end of the pier. There are a few boats anchored off the end of the pier. As you see here, 1958, 4 years later, the breakwater was completely gone and you no longer see boats. So now we're getting to the medal. Someone in 1933 produced a series of dollar-sized medals to commemorate the Santa Monica Breakwater. They were struck by the Los Angeles Rubber Stamp Company, and you can see the LARS Co. At the bottom there. The company would go out of business in 1960, and with it, the minted figures and information about the medals were lost. It became the Los Angeles Stamp and Stationery Company, which went out of business in 1963. I haven't been able to find out what happened to it since. Someone named Aneo purchased dies from the LA Rubber Stamp Company at an auction and restruck a number of different Southern California tokens with the old dies, but have not seen any Aneo restrikes of the Breakwater token. So the obverse on this H&K dollar features an aerial view of the breakwater. Again, you have the sand, you have the pier, there's a breakwater at the end. Souvenir Breakwater, 1933, Santa Monica, California. As the breakwater wasn't completed until August 1934, I think this aerial view is likely an artist's rendition. The reverse of the breakwater features a woman in a fashionable swimsuit of the day. And to confirm the fashion, this is a picture of my grandparents in 1928 or 1929 at the Southern California beach. This is probably at Santa Monica. Interesting, my Granny Fanny is wearing a headband just like this lady too. In case you were wondering, the swimsuits of the day mostly were made of wool with cotton lining or made of ribbed cotton. Um, Another thing, next to the LA Rubber Stamp Company were numbers 1 through 14. I don't know why. I'm not sure anybody ever did know. Occasionally, that's left blank. And what confused me initially about this token, or medal, if you will, is here's the Santa Monica Municipal Pier in the breakwater. This is a different pier. The roller coaster on the Santa Monica Pier had been removed 3 years earlier. So looking back at pictures, I found an image of the Lick Pier in Ocean Park, um, and it's the same image. So it's just looking from a different angle. This woman is on the north side of the beach looking south towards the pier, and you can see there's a spiral shaped attraction on the pier here. This beach scene is on the south side of the pier looking north, and you can see the same spiral sized um, uh, attraction. So it was kind of confusing when I first looked at it, thinking there were different piers, and that's why I was confused. These are the varieties, the Hibbler and Kaplan H&K varieties as listed in the book. There was one made out of sterling, stamped as you see here, and here's the number 1, for instance, next to the LA Rubber Stamp Company. They made them out of copper, bronze, and brass. H&K 684 was brass with a bronze center, the center being a 24 millimeter diameter size. I could not find an image of that, but HK 685A and B are brass with aluminum center or aluminum with brass center. There was one made out of nickel. And finally, there is the aluminum variety. And besides the plain aluminum variety, there were 3 varieties made of anodized aluminum in yellow, blue, and orange. And I have not been able to find an image of the orange token. So I'd love to see one if one of you has a picture of it. And there's one final tiny note that I have not seen mentioned anywhere. All of the anodized aluminum tokens or metals have a little hole in them. And it doesn't say why. My best guess is they're probably strung together. The plain aluminum metals were strung together on a wire and dipped in the anodizing solution as the electric current did the colorization process, but I'm not sure of that, and I'd like somebody to confirm it. So I have not been able to find any info on who actually produced these tokens. They seem as much an advertising piece for the local Pacific Park beach and amusement area, as well as commemorative for the breakwater. And what started out as just a plan to describe a simple nostalgic token turned into a deeper investigation of some childhood hangouts. I'm really glad I did it, and I look forward to hearing any more info from you guys. Surf's up, dudes.
Oh, great. Thank you, Charlie. Surf's up indeed. Anybody have any questions for Charlie on this, or any ideas about the circle in there? I mean,
Charlie, are there other numbers on the tokens? I saw the 1 and the 14. Are there ones beside?
Apparently, all 14 numbers, at least in the literature, I say, are there. So there's a 11, a 14, and a 1. I think there might have been one out of there on the varieties that I show, but the information I read said all 14 numbers are there, and sometimes it's not even listed. Don't know why.
I think your hypothesis about the wire is probably fairly accurate. They probably did it fairly inexpensively, and that would do the trick. So chemically, it oxidizes the surface, and then they would have dyes in the baths that would impregnate that porous oxide surface to give it its color.
Right.
My knowledge.
Yeah, that sounds right. Anybody else? Well, I remember seeing that pier when I was down there visiting. Oh God, who was I visiting? I think my elderly aunt. And I was too young to really appreciate any of it, but it was nice.
Well, I lived a little further south, down in Orange County area, so we always went to the Huntington Beach or the Newport Beach piers, and they were very nice as well. But they didn't seem to have all the attractions that are the roller coasters and the carousels and that kind of stuff. That's pretty cool. I didn't even know those were up there further north. So
Yeah.
I wish I would have as a kid. They look like a blast.
Well, those would have been competing with Disneyland and Knott's Berry Farm. So,
Charlie, I was intrigued by the bimetal ones that you pictured. And so I went to Token Catalog and I went to Ocean Park because I remembered that there were bimetal tokens that were 38 millimeters, actually. So the same size. That were part of a game, good for 5 points and things. And they come both ways. They're actually quite common. They come both ways, aluminum on the outside and aluminum on the inside with brass. And so my guess is that LA Rubber Stamp just used those planchets, the same type of planchets for the two pieces.
Are they the same size?
They are the same size. I'll share screen and show you. So here's one of them.
Right.
And then there's another one, which would take me a little longer to find, but anyway. But it looks like the same fabric as the bimetal so-called dollar.
Yeah, LA Rubber Stamp did a lot of tokens for Southern California amusements and things like that, I noticed. I'd be curious what really happened to them because they were sold in 1960 and then they basically went bankrupt as a different company or closed down in 1963. And I was hoping Bill Hyder would be here because I figured he usually answers all these obsequious questions. But
so those breakwater tokens, are they readily available? Can you find them fairly easily, or? Yeah,
there are a lot of them. Actually, the yellow and blue ones are actually both. They're MS66 or 67. They're on a heritage auction. Just for fun, I'm following their prices. The bid now $66, but you can get them for under $100. Most of the varieties. I only found the one nickel variety in Heritage Archives. I only found one silver variety in an archives, but the aluminum ones are readily available. And unless you want to get one in super high grade condition, they're not that outrageously expensive.
Yeah, good. Okay.
Can I chime in on one thing and share a screen?
Please do.
Let me try to get this. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yay.
So, yeah, I have a few of these. I don't know all the details. That was a wonderful presentation, Charlie. This is one of the orange ones that I have. What I don't know if people are aware of is that they come in green and red. And so I kind of have these pictures up here.
Nice.
I also don't really know the situation of why they were stamped. I think some people have theorized they were poker chips or did something along those lines. But I picked up this red one out of a junk drawer or junk pile that Dwayne Feisel had at one of the National Token Collectors Association. And then this green one I bought from Jeff Shevlin. So had them for a few years, but it's a it's kind of like one of these fun things to own, but I don't know more of the details about, about them. So.
Cool.
Pacific Ocean Park has a bunch of paper tokens that are all around the Southern California area at the flea markets and whatnot. So they had a lot of things, I guess, that they gave out for their games and their rides.
Cool. Awesome. You're muted, Charlie.
Thank you, Herb. I think I saw a couple. They may have had those at Token Catalog. I was happy just to find the one metal one that actually said POP on it, because it just, you grew up as a kid, you hear about that, and I knew there had to be one somewhere. There are probably a lot more, So there's for a big Southern Cal collector.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Any other
questions? One last thing.
Sure.
When we were at Disneyland, we were at one of the stores across from Ariel's Grotto, which is where we took our kids. And I was wandering in the store, and up on high, they had artifacts from the 1933 breakwater. So if you ever go to Disneyland in SoCal and you go to that little pier that's near Ariel's Grotto where all the kids go to see their favorite characters, the gift shop across from it has a lot of art up on the upper ceilings related to the talk tonight. So that's the only other little tidbit.
And that's in Disney's California Adventure.
Yes, correct.
Specifically.
Correct.
Just so you don't go to the wrong park, Charlie.
Well, that's happened to me.
Yeah. Okay.